Well, again, Craig here with another video relating to the underground dual Quonset hut project. But a lot of you have maybe found this video because you saw the things about the Manlift and are curious. And well, I'm going to show you a way that you can have a Manlift or a bucket truck a lot cheaper than what you would have to pay otherwise. Maybe you have a project that's going to take a lot longer and you can't really afford to rent a bucket truck that long and want to get your own, but found they're too expensive. Stick around. This video is going to show you some details of what I did that's kind of interesting on how you can turn a digger derrick into a bucket truck. First, let me start through the decision process I needed to come through to determine that I needed a Manlift. I actually need two Manlifts, but I'm going to be renting one on the day of the shooting. By shooting, I mean concrete. The dual underground Quonset hut project is applied concrete with a gun, basically. It shoots the concrete, either a process called gunite or shotcrete, to the outside of this arch, of these arches. Now, the small arch is 20 feet wide by 10 feet high. The larger arch is 40 feet wide by 20 feet high. So there's no way I'm going to be doing it from the ground level, because you have to be able to get it within maybe 5 to 8 feet of where you're trying to apply the concrete. So you have to get pretty close. So unless I build massive scaffolding all over the entire arch in order to, on day of the pour, we call it a pour, but it's actually a shooting, it's just not going to work. And that would be extremely expensive and time consuming, and then to break it down. So the scaffolding idea was kind of out. So I needed something where I could get in up and get right up there. Crawling around the arch isn't really possible either, because it's just so dangerous to be up there and you're trying to maneuver around this heavy gun in order to shoot the process. Now, I'm not going to be applying it myself. I'm going to have others apply it. You got to understand, most of these gunite and shotcrete crews, they do not have Manlifts. This is not something, they're usually doing this for pools or something on the ground level. They're usually not doing it for something high up. So they don't have Manlifts. There's bucket trucks can come as small as like a pickup truck, but that just didn't have the reach for me. They come in really huge ones too, which they're overkill for what I need to do. Then there's telehandlers, which also can be equipped with man buckets that can be helpful too. They don't have controls in the cab though. And there's also these tree trimming machines, which are very portable, can be towed, and they unfold, and they can be used as man lifts as well. There's also these scissors type man lifts. They're usually for really flat concrete floors and high ceilings of inside buildings usually. There's lots of different varieties of them. So when I got looking around at man lifts, I found them to be rather expensive for what little they do. So it didn't even seem like an option based on the budget that I'm dealing with. There was no way I could afford a Manlift because it was out of my price range. I could just rent two machines on the day of the pour, which is actually a shooting, whatever you want to call it. Two machines, because one of them needs to have the person in it applying the concrete, and another one basically following around, finishing it with trowels. So I'll need two machines. But I had an idea of being able to, when I started looking around these things, I found other types of trucks that weren't manlifts, but maybe could be converted to manlifts. So this is what I did. I ended up buying something called a digger derrick. Now, a digger derrick is a machine that is used by utility companies primarily. And it's designed it has an auger on it, so where it digs the hole for a telephone pole. And then it can actually pick up the telephone pole, insert it into the hole. And that's the primary use of these things. Now, these machines have very little application in the civilian world or even the contractor world, so they're actually pretty cheap in comparison. The equivalent type of truck with a bucket on it would have cost me about 3 times what I paid for this. And I didn't pay very much for this. The digger derricks aren't in high demand in the marketplace, in the civilian and contractor marketplace, because there's not much use for them. Aside from setting poles. They'd be great for pole barns. Other than that, there's not a lot of use for them. But I also found how I can use this as a crane, and I have been using it as a crane for various things I've already done. I have a big machine that I use for digging, and I can lift really heavy things up with that, but it's difficult to use as a crane. So I thought of the dual purpose use of this machine as a crane and as a manlift, but of course it didn't have a manlift bucket on it, so I had to alleviate that. The digger derrick came in handy already. In fact, one of the first main tasks I did, I removed an engine from a crawler loader I'm trying to rebuild the engine of. pulled the engine with my big machine, and then brought it to a place where I could grab it with the Pitman Polecat and use that as a crane to pick it up, put it in the bed of the Pitman Polecat, take it to a machine shop to have them rebuild the engine, go pick it up back up and bring it back and put it back in a place where I could pick it up with my big machine again and put it back in the crawler loader. By the way, I need a good mechanic to figure out how to finish this project. I've hired, I think, 7 mechanics already, and I haven't been able to get one that can finish this project. I'm 95% of the way done. Just need to finish hooking the thing up, and I need to find an old school mechanic that knows how to work on a real diesel machine that doesn't have computers. When the Quonset hut actually was delivered, I didn't have a fork truck or tractor to be able to pick them off of there, and my big machine is in a position where I can't get it to the road right now. So I was able to unload it with this digger derrick, using it as a crane. The capacity of this machine isn't great for a crane. It has about a 7.5 ton capacity at the closest radius, but only about a 3/4 ton capacity at the tip of the boom when it's fully extended horizontally. That's enough for this bucket, 2 men, and some basic tools. So that was suitable for me. Plus it had the height I needed. It can go about 40 feet high, it can go about 35 feet to the side. So it's going to be suitable to do this project. The crane was a bonus. The manlifts can't really be used as cranes. For small loads, you probably could, but they're really not designed. This is designed to be used as a crane, and I'm going to fit it with a manlift bucket. The bucket that I'm installing, it was salvaged off of another machine, and I fitted it out with some hardware, did some special welding on it to make it to where I can mount it to the tip of the digger derrick so that it could be mounted on the end of the arm. Since the pin is on a higher elevation of the bucket, it basically balances itself with a man standing in it. It is shaky, it moves around, and I can pin it to stop it from shaking, but it won't ever flip over unless you're pulling on a hose or something and it put a lot of extra strain on the side. All of these manlift buckets today, these bucket trucks or manlift machines, they all have the controls inside the bucket to where the person inside the bucket can operate the machine. It makes sense, but my machine wasn't equipped with that because it was never designed to have a bucket, first of all. To convert it to a bucket truck with controls in the machine is prohibitively expensive. I would have saved money by just buying a manlift machine that already had the controls in it. So it's very, very expensive to do this because there's either 2 ways. Now mine happens to be a hydraulic machine, so I'd have to run hydraulic lines all the way up to this telescoping arm. So the lines change lengths as the process goes along, and to be able to pivot and rotate and all the things it has to do to get those controls up in the cab would have been extremely expensive and complicated with a lot of hydraulic hoses. I think it's something in the nature of 16 hoses to go up the top of the bucket. So that was out of the question. It can be done solenoid operated electrically, where there's electric controls, because most of the modern ones today are done by wire. So there's a switches in the cab, electrical switches that control solenoids back down in the main hydraulic package of the machine, so the hydraulics are controlled by electric. That would have been easier because then all I had to do was run a wire up there, but I still had to account for that movement and everything else associated with it, and equip my bucket truck, my digger derrick with hydraulic valves, which it did electrically operated solenoid valves, which it didn't have. It had hydraulic valves, manual hydraulic valves. So that was out of the question too, because then I would have to change all the valves over to solenoid operated ones. So here's what I did. My thinking mind, I like working out problems, making things work for me that otherwise wouldn't work for anybody. And frankly, this won't work for everybody. Beware. There are some downfalls to this, which I'm going to be going over as I do this. I turned my bucket truck, my digger derrick, into a bucket truck using ropes. Ropes to the actual handles of the equipment that's already there. Poor man's way of doing this, okay? I had to ghetto something together to make this work for me, and this is what I've done. Let me go over the safety of doing something like this. First of all, I'm operating this thing from the bucket, or I can do it from the ground. Using ropes, pulling. You can't push a rope, it's pull. So if something gets caught, or let's say you're trying to trim a tree and a tree limb falls on your ropes, you got problems. So do not beware of doing this This is not for contractors. This is not for anybody who has OSHA looking over their shoulders. This will not work for you, okay? You'll have to spend the extra money and get a real Manlift machine. But for what I'm doing here, private ownership on my own land for my own project, this is what I'm doing. I'm using ropes. You can't push on a rope. You got to only be pull, and I'm hooking them directly up to this valve that operates it from the seat, which is down at the base of the crane. And I'm able to operate 4 of the 8 functions. Actually, there's more than 8 functions, but I only needed 4 of the functions in order to get this machine to do what I wanted to do up in the bucket. I had to make sure that it would work not only with the boom in a horizontal position, but anywhere in between horizontal to vertical. There's a lot of geometry I had to work out to do this, strictly with ropes and pulleys. And I was able to get this thing to work from the bucket using these ropes and pulleys. Now, operating a crane can be very dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. You really need to study this a little bit. You can get into trouble big time. You'll find hundreds of videos on YouTube here that show cranes tipping over and failures with cranes. You don't want that to happen to you. That gets very expensive. I already had some practical experience in an industrial application working with a crane for many years. And these cranes lift more than 200 tons. So I did have knowledge of rigging and crane safety already. But one thing on mobile cranes like this is the outriggers. You very definitely have to use outriggers. You have to understand what you're doing. Because I'm working on soft soils, I made these pads, these wooden pads out of white oak, in order to distribute the weight so they don't just sink into the ground. And you have to get the machine as level as possible in order to get your capacity and lifting ratings up to snuff. It's very important for crane work to get balance proper. The bucket I designed to mount on this machine, I can mount it on either side of the boom. It doesn't automatically, but it's manually removed, and I can easily move the bucket in about 4 or 5 minutes from one side to the other. It takes me a little over 5 minutes to set up the actual controls that I built, which are removable. They're only clamped in place. All fits in this box. Basically, I tied the ropes to the ends of the valves. They don't fall off the top because of the knob at the end, but they can slide down, so I put these plastic spacers on there to keep the ropes from sliding down, so the ropes are pretty stabilized, but still easily removed. 8 ropes, 12 pulleys, all had to work together to make this function properly. At the base of the boom, there's a seat with 8 controllers in front of me and 4 to the side of me. Now, the 8 in front, of those 8, I only needed 4 really to make this operational as I needed it to be while I am inside the basket. So I only equipped this machine to run off of the 4 controllers up in the basket. Made the unit smaller, made it a little simpler, because already using color-coded ropes, I had to keep these ropes straight up in the cab and keep them from getting tangled up from each other, which is another chore in itself. A 3-story emergency escape ladder, just in case. Operating the machine from the basket turned out to work pretty well. I was rather pleased with the final results. The ropes, of course, are more cumbersome than regular controls, but it did work fine. I color-coded all the ropes so that I know which one was separate. Now, of course, I can label those because each color had 2 ropes, so you had to know which one to pull in order to get to do your left or right, or whatever function it was. The 4 functions that I maintained to operate via the ropes in the basket were the boom, which raises me up or down, the rotate, which of course rotates me completely in a 360-degree circle if I want, and the other 2 are for extending the 2 booms, one for each boom, because it has 2 extending booms. One is the main extending boom, then the farthest one is the stinger. If you've never operated a Manlift bucket from inside the bucket, they get a little scary if you're not used to it. Every little movement of controls seems to be magnified and overkill when you're in the basket. So you want to move it an inch and it moves 8 inches and goes back to where you were. It can be a little scary. You got to be very careful with them. And also when you're raising it up to the highest points where you're elevated more, they can get a little scary just by being up high, but you get a good view when you're up there. For my regular viewers who have made it this far, sorry I haven't been putting out videos, but it's become discouraging when your channel can't grow. I enjoyed doing this more when I saw my viewership go up, my number of views go up, my subscribers go up, everything was going up until it just kind of stopped about 2.5, 3 years ago. And so I haven't made much video because it gets discouraging. The YouTube algorithm changed to where it doesn't favor the little guy like me who doesn't have a monetized channel. You see, a lot of what I did was debunking a lot of the nonsense on YouTube, the liars, the scam artists. And when you do that, apparently you piss off YouTube because YouTube now wants to cut you off because I'm not making money. Well, I'm still making them money, but I'm not monetized, so I'm not making them as much money as they want. I have no monetized channel. I don't make a single penny off this channel. But I'm attacking the people that do, and attacking the people that lie for money, this scam artists that are purposely lying for money, and YouTube favors that. They favor the lies. They don't tell you that, but they favor those lies. Try doing some searches and find out what happens. It's hard to get any of my videos to come up on searches anymore. The YouTube algorithm downgraded me, so that's prevented me from growing at all in the last 2 to 3 years. And it's just discouraging. I like seeing it grow. It's probably going to be in the future all I can do to keep it from getting cut off. I haven't had any strikes in many years against the channel, but if they want to get rid of me further, they will. I'm damaging the viewership. Hopefully, I'm damaging the viewership of the people that are scamming for money, but YouTube favors those people. So that's why I haven't been making much videos. And I don't know, during this project, I don't know if I'm going to have that many videos during the project. I just may not have the time. I don't really know what's going to happen here this year in the future when I'm trying to build this thing. There's going to be so many hardships working alone, doing this all myself, and I may have to hire somebody to help me on much of it. There's only 2 things that I actually intend to hire people on, and that is the actual pour of the slab, which takes a whole crew out there. I can do it. I know what to do, but I need a whole crew out there on the day of the pour. And then the shotcrete application, as I described in this video already. That's the only 2 things that I think right now that I really can't do on my own by myself. So we'll see what happens. Thanks for watching, though. Stay tuned.